Oh, I wonder if the projector's dead. That's exciting. Oh, maybe. Not the end of the world. All right, so it's a forest and outdoor recreation, and this is pretty important because we want to kind of sharpen the pencil on this pretty well, because if we're thinking about the wrong kinds of reasons for doing something hard but worthwhile, like forestry and land management, shared community management of our public resources, stuff like that. If we're doing it for the wrong reasons, we're going to slowly start to track off away from what is good, right? Even if we start off on the right foot, without the right values and kind of sense of it, we're free to go off in any wild, not so great direction. So, we're going through some benefits of forest and outdoor recreation, what we get back out of forest recreation, both as rangers and as people who like to do forest and outdoor recreation, and as sort of more broadly Americans and all humanity. What kind of do we get out of this after putting a bunch of work in to be park rangers, to set aside places like national parks, wilderness area, compartments inside of those, and stuff like that? It is a lot of work, and there's nothing wrong with that. Good things are usually worth some effort. So one of the clusters of benefits out of forest and outdoor recreation is the sense of a developing self-efficacy, right? So if you are just kind of going to school and then going to work drone, you may not have a lot of sort of impactful or powerfully formative life experiences that give you a sense of you are capable of more than just being a warm body in a seat at school, or eventually in some, anonymous cubicle at work, which sounds like corporate hell to me, but some people get into it. So without forest and outdoor recreation, we have other ways, certainly lots of other ways, of building a sense of self-efficacy and all the kind of ingredients that go into it, right? So last class session on Tuesday, we left off talking about your own past successes. You start to build on that. You go for a hike one time, and you don't have to come back and get a leg amputated because it kind of went okay. You're more likely to go for another hike next time, and maybe even a slightly longer hike, a slightly more challenging hike, or a slightly more beneficial hike. Like that first time, you're just trying to figure out where the trail goes, how to get back safely to the trailhead, so you can get back for your tree ID quiz, study for that, make $1 million, right? The second time, you're not trying to figure out where that trail goes because you've answered that question. So you're able to build on this. Past successes feed into your current sense of self-efficacy. And in some cases, where it is sort of safe and encouraged to do so, if you want to think about it, your past failures can, with a certain kind of attitude, kind of feed into your sense of self-efficacy as well. Like, okay, so I went on this trail run along this same trail, and it was kind of awful. Like, I about rolled my ankle 3 times before I got back to the trailhead, and I'm gonna consider that an L on the scoreboard for this trail run. I had to slow way down, and it wasn't kind of the workout I was looking for, maybe. This is a hypothetical. Clearly, I have a dad bod, and like trail running is, that's somebody else's that old thing. Anyway, but with the right attitude, if you really like trail running, or if you like just being out on that particular trail, this imaginary trail we're talking about, then you kind of go back to it while you're showering off afterwards, or you're waking up the next morning and you're thinking, okay, so that wasn't great, but I think if I maybe replaced my trail running shoes with the new pair, because mine are kind of worn out and I was feeling every rock and root through the sole, then that past failure of that previous run that didn't go so great, right, that's it's a nice little nudge to get a fresh pair of Nikes, as the rappers say, and try it again. See if that goes any better. And along the way, you're getting a little bit more fit. Even if the trail run wasn't perfect, it also didn't make things a whole lot worse, you know? So, the sense of past successes, vicarious successes of other people in things like Forestry Club where they are doing cool stuff, and you hear their stories at Hangar as you guys are all hanging out, you know, the next week or something, and they're saying, oh yeah, we were doing this thing together as Forestry Club. It was a blast. You should come out next time. That vicarious success, you experiencing a positive affect, positive emotional state from other people having a good time doing something that you're interested in, well, that's a pretty strong kind of nudge to go out and enjoy that thing, maybe with them. And when you are enjoying something with somebody, you get some of that feedback of, nice, bruh, there's a pretty juggy handhold up to your right that you probably can't see, and they're talking you through it. So companions help you through and help develop that sense of self-efficacy. Maybe you couldn't do that particular rock climb, that particular route or pitch, without somebody kind of spotting you and saying, all right, move your left leg up just a little bit. There's a tiny little ledge that wasn't a great handhold, but it might be perfect for your leg, and that'll sort of get you up through this tough section, the crux of that particular climb. So this is all good stuff, right? This is developing, in a lot of cases for most people, not everybody, but for most people, it's nice to hang out with folks with a healthy sense of self-efficacy. It's not this constant sort of negative messaging of life is pointless, I am pointless, I can't do anything, I'm not even going to bother trying because I know how it's going to turn out, right? Somebody with a healthy sense of self-efficacy is like, yeah, okay, maybe this lab session is complex or hard, but okay, I'm just going to work hard through it. I'm going to get through this, I'm going to survive, you know? And we're going to learn some stuff along the way. It's nice hanging out with folks like that because they spur you on to do a little bit more, to do a little bit better, to enjoy it a little bit more as you're doing it, and recount the tales of your battles and victories afterwards, so the skalds will sing of you like in Skyrim, right? So, the fourth component, that sort of fourth ingredient of how self-efficacy develops in us is this not so much interpersonal thing of companion feedback or vicarious success or intrapersonal thing within yourself of experiencing and reflecting on your past successes to develop that sense of self-efficacy. The fourth piece is physiological. This is not a conscious process, but it influences your conscious process. Yo. And this is physiological arousal, not in the sexual sense, but in the sort of biochemical, the hormone sense, the stress hormone cortisol, for example. Just a few molecules of cortisol will change things like your vasopressure, your blood pressure, your pulse rate, your respiration rate, and so on and so forth. So this is a biochemical level or neurochemical as well level kind of feedback cycle. So let's kind of climb inside the brain and body of somebody out on a trail, or no, let's not do a trail. What's a forced outdoor rec thing that anybody has done recently in the last month here? Around campus or on the Shawnee, around town, out of Crab Orchard?
Wood duck hunt.
Wood duck hunt. Outstanding. Or maybe out laying in a blind or something. Okay, cool. So let's take wood duck hunting. So this is probably not happening at 10:10 in the morning. When do you go wood duck hunting? What time of day?
Well, it just all depends. Leave, get out there, about 3 or 4 in the morning.
3 or 4 in the morning. Okay.
Yeah.
I am not a morning person. So just hearing that, like, this is not perceptible at this point. We might get there, but at this point, I hear 3, 4 in the morning, and my stress level goes up just a little bit. My brain is like, danger, danger, danger. Somebody wants you to wake up before you're ready to wake up at like 11, right? I never really grew out of that college phase. Anyway, yeah.
Speaking of vicarious experience, I vicariously felt the struggle of getting up and early.
All right, the struggle is real, right? Even if it's vicarious. Okay. So, we're thinking about getting up at 3, 4 in the morning, and I'm sorry for this, but I'm in my mid-40s, so here we go with a dad joke. You gotta have all your ducks in a row so that when you get up at 3 or 4 in the morning, you're not like looking for your camo pants or, I don't know, like your activated charcoal shampoo, or you don't really do scent management in duck hunting, right? Okay. Making sure you got your permits and tags and the instrument of waterfowl destruction that you are planning on wielding, and you have to have a lot of stuff marshaled and lined up and ready to go. Okay? So, when you're wood duck hunting, when do you start kind of getting ready for that? Like, when do you buy the gun?
When do I buy the gun?
Yeah.
Oh, well, normally you have a gun already.
But when did you buy it? So that you already have it?
Years ago.
Years ago?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a real process.
Yeah.
Okay. And when are you figuring out where you're gonna go?
You gotta spend time and like go scout and look
Okay. Cool.
around all sorts of just bodies of water.
So, for wood duck hunting and every other kind of forest and outdoor recreation, really any other thing that we're trying to do, it's not just forest recreation based, but it's very recognizable here in forest rec. First time you go scouting, you have a 100% chance of finding like the perfect sweet spot that you want to. Why not?
Because you're dealing with living animals.
Dealing with living animals, it's a complex situation. You don't have 100% control over, well, the wind that day, the weather, and a spot that seemed perfect 3 weeks ago when you were driving around scouting stuff out might be kind of just the wrong spot. Like you didn't realize the prevailing wind direction was a little bit different at 5 a.m. when you're out there just before sunrise, and you really need that particular set of conditions because birds don't necessarily fly agnostic of prevailing wind patterns, right? A lot of birds have to take off into the wind, for example. So that's a thing. It matters. And sometimes marshaling all those details doesn't go perfectly right the first time, especially if you're like a first-time duck hunter, maybe with nobody to show you the ropes.
I
Zane?
mean, birds in particular don't stay in the same spot for very long at all. They move around.
Well, yeah, especially, right? We're talking about migratory waterfowl. They're here today and gone tomorrow because they're trying to get somewhere else. This is the Great Mississippi Flyway, not the Great Mississippi, like, sit here, you know? So, you get out there, and we're not even hunting ducks yet. We're just scouting locations. And we don't have a 100% chance of that first spot that we check out being like this mythical unicorn perfect match. Maybe you do, you know, sometimes we get lucky, but it's not a 100% guarantee. Nothing is. And so, for most all of us, there's this sense, and it might be a pre-conscious sense, like not frontmost in your mental model or what you're thinking about, but it's in your brain and in your body all the same, is, okay, so this first place doesn't work out, I gotta have kind of my list to check off, and I'll go over here and go over there, and then if I come up dry on all of those, I'm gonna call my buddy who's a year ahead of me in school. He's also been duck hunting. He's probably got a couple of spots that I don't know of on his radar, or her radar, so I may reach out to them if these, first 3, 4 don't work out. That's stressful because you don't have a perfect sense of how it's gonna turn out. There's just some unknowns. That's a pretty okay kind of stressful. Like, were you in a bad mood driving around scouting locations, or was this actually half the fun?
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. So, there is good stress and there's bad stress. Eustress and distress. As it turns out, when we have no stress in our lives, we are in a very, very bad spot. So when you put somebody into a sensory deprivation tank, for example, where the water is blood warm and there is 0 audio pressure, 0 decibels, people start going crazy real fast. Like genuinely hearing voices, seeing things. Our brains need stimulation. This is why it is considered inhumane treatment of prisoners to do protracted solitary confinement, especially of prisoners of war. Okay? So, we need stress in our lives. Enough that we don't go crazy, but also not too much so that we don't go crazy, right? We don't get traumatized or brutalized by chronic, unrelenting negative levels of stress. So we can have eustress and distress. Good, we want some of this. If you are or ever have played on a sporting team, soccer, football, frisbee golf, whatever, flag football, games are stressful in a good way. You are in a heightened state of physiological and mental arousal when that buzzer goes off and the half or the period or the quarter starts, right? Burst into motion, going after the ball, trying to score, etc., supporting your teammates. That is a state of eustress. You're focused, you're present, you're doing good things, you're having a good time doing good things. Even if you're intently focused and you're really pretty serious, like we all know folks who've gotten like super into a game, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe if you're not into like physical sports, esports, something like that. We've all got that one friend from high school who threw their Wiimote through like the flat panel TV screen back when they were a kid because they were super into the game, right? That's a state of physiological, emotional, mental arousal. And with that comes a whole bunch of hormones and changes to pulse, skin conductance, right? We start to sweat just a little bit. We start to breathe a little bit faster. We start to change our body language to be more biased towards the balls of our feet instead of flat-footed or rocking back on our heels. We lean forward. Our vision can go into tunnel vision mode. Have you ever heard of somebody getting into a car accident because of target lock or highway hypnosis? This is a real thing. Your brain stops processing most of your visual field and contracts down to about a 15-degree cone of vision straight out your eyes. We can experience in extreme instances of typically distress, but it can occasionally happen with eustress, of auditory compartmentalization, where if a gun goes off and that's freaking you out, to protect your ability to concentrate, your brain will stop processing audio signals. You literally stop hearing. And there's no damage to your ears in that scenario. It's just that your brain is making important decisions on a survival basis, in that case, to exclude certain kinds of stimuli that aren't helpful for figuring out your survival for the next 10 seconds. Okay? So, this is a real thing. And it's probably pretty low-key, just chilling, driving around Southern Illinois looking for a spot to hunt wood ducks. But it can go all the way up to auditory exclusion. Okay? So this is a real thing, and it is a very powerful thing, and it's kind of a pre-conscious thing. We're not really thinking about our blood pressure as we're driving around looking for a spot to set up a blind and get ready to duck hunt and stuff like that, but it's happening all the same. So when this is happening, you're learning. You're learning a lot. When you're in a place of eustress, it is focus. It might be even while you're actually hunting, a state of flow. So flow is that state of being where your body, your skills, your mind, your training, your experience, all of this stuff is coming right here. And it's those times when you're so intent on what you're doing, like it's right at the edge of your skill, but it's not too hard, and it's also not boring because it's too easy. You're riding that wave that might crash over into the, oh man, this is too hard. I just died in this Mario game that I'm playing. Let me replay the level, and so forth. And then you look up the clock, and 5 hours go by. So, take a second and think about when you have ever experienced flow. A really good movie can put you in a state of flow, although that's less common. Usually flow is accessed by people who are artists, performers, athletes, outdoor recreationists, where you're in the zone. This is another way of informally talking about this formal state of flow. Anybody think of a time when you were in flow? Yeah.
Well, I was in the band in high school, so it was a lot of performing, so I got to be in flow
Okay.
frequently.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter what else is happening anywhere else in the world. You are there, right there, and your whole horizon is that
Yeah, just
football field.
Yeah.
Okay. Marching band. Anybody else?
Going hiking with Doc Holzmiller out in Appalachia over a resource camp.
Yeah. Okay.
Dude's got some long legs, so I just kind of zoned out and kept going.
Okay. Right. And so you are not feeling every footfall. You are in the zone. So this typically it's a really satisfying feeling. There are people who experience flow doing something, and then they can spend literally the rest of their lives chasing that sense of I'm present, I'm right here, right now. I am at the outer limit of my skill and ability in this setting. So that means it's a moving target as well, right? Maybe we start out hunting paper targets on our backyard or shotgun range at our farm. And when you're learning how to do that for the first time, like learning about the proprioceptive, the muscle action and effort exertion and how to arrange your limbs, collectively proprioception, that it takes to muster a shotgun and get the business end in the correct direction and get those pellets towards the target. And then you get pretty good at that, and so after a while, doing that doesn't put you in flow state. It's just practice. It's just repetitive. It's just boring now. So the wave now crests a little further out, a little bit higher. So you move on to shooting moving but non-living targets like clays. And you're in the zone because you got to be completely focused on that tiny area and that action and unconsciously making the physics calculations, the parabolic math of leading your target in terms of how hot your load is and how much powder is behind those pellets and like the length of your shells and your barrel spread pattern and how hard is that clay getting flung and does it have a whole bunch of spin on it or is it wobbling like crazy? Or did it shatter on its way out of the launcher? Because dang it, sometimes that happens, right? You're right there in that moment, and your brain is like dozens of times a second evaluating and updating its state of what's going on. Your thin slicing time, like we were talking about a couple weeks ago. So from there, maybe you get on to duck hunting, or maybe you grow up duck hunting with family, and that's how you learn to handle a firearm in the first place, right? It's a little bit different for everybody. But the idea is that flow is like peak eustress. Like you're super into it. Your pulse might be racing, or it might be actually a really relaxed, more zen-like kind of flow. But you lose hold of that sense of time because you're so completely focused on whatever it is that you're focused on. That's a really good thing. That's a really healthy thing. So I hope that everybody can think back to, I kind of lose myself reading a really good book, right? That can be flow, especially if the book challenges you just a little bit with keeping track of more dynamic characters or maybe a little bit of unfamiliar vocabulary that you are kind of straining your brain to think about or figure out in context reading the book so you don't have to go pick up a dictionary and kind of interrupt that flow. Okay? It can be kind of anything. Is everybody able to think of at least one or a couple of times when you've been kind of in that flow state? Awesome. You're doing a ton of growth, development, skill acquisition, and refinement, and self-efficacy building in flow. So, forced and outdoor recreation activities are prime suspects for inducing a sense or state of flow in somebody. It can be for hours at a time. It can be for days or weeks successively at a time on a longer trip, and so on and so forth. When you come back from that trip, when you come back from that duck hunting sortie, you are coming back a better person in a lot of ways, or at least you've developed your skills that little bit more. You got that little bit extra experience and seasoned perspective of, I had a great time, and this year I didn't even see any ducks. Like, I saw one set and they just kind of flew right on by. But I had a great time anyway. I was just kind of hanging out, thinking, doing some reflection. Got some big choices to make in my next couple of years as I graduate here, so where do I want to go with that? And this duck hunting trip was perfect, even though I never got to pull the trigger. That is a great, great, great clue that you've experienced flow, okay? Where the outcome matters less than how you felt, the process of it, right? It's the journey more than the destination, that kind of a thing. This is where that literally takes shape. So, we get folks out of this flow state or beyond this flow state after the activity is complete. Your hike is over. Your marching band halftime show or competition is over. You get back from the hunting trip, and you are a different and more developed person as a result. You are convinced, having now done it, that you can set up the right kinds of gear, clothing mostly, ground pads, stuff like that, to be comfortable and safe when it's really cold and dark out and you're exposed to the elements. You can be perfectly safe in that case. One of my most favorite memories of flow was when I was walking across the southern Appalachian ridgeline, not too far from where you guys were at summer camp. I was actually just south of that in late March of 2004, hiking the AT. It was a blizzard. It was a whiteout blizzard, and I'm on top of a mountain range where the blizzard is like still in the clouds, and I can't see anything. I can't see like 20 feet ahead. And the Appalachian Trail, down south they call it the Appalachian Trail, up north it's the Appalachian Trail, which is regional differences, right? I can't see the trail, and I can't figure out where the trail is because the Appalachian Trail is blazed with white blazes, reassurance markers, we call them now. And up on those Tennessee and North Carolina balds, where it's an open grassy patch, looks like a pasture, but it's not, surrounded by Appalachian forest, there's no trees. And the trail goes right through the middle of these open balds, which might be hundreds of meters long or a mile long or more. And there's just these big open strips, really cool and weird. And there's like 8 inches of snow on the ground in whiteout blizzard conditions, and I'm looking for white blazes. And initially, that wasn't looking too good. Like, you know, long distance backpackers don't have spacesuit grade thermal regulation gear, you know, top and bottom fleece basically. It is about as much as we're going to carry. So I need to keep moving, because if I stop moving, it's too cold to survive, especially with that wind chill. So I'm having to think on, okay, this could go really well, or this could go really badly, and I can't stop. I don't want to turn around and go back, because that's more miles I'm gonna have to walk forward. So I'm gonna keep aiming forward and walking along this ridgeline, and trust that I can pick up the trail when we get back into the trees at the far end of this ball, which I can't see right now because it's whiteout conditions. And realizing I'm not likely to get lost in whiteout blizzard conditions, walking in the cloud, even though there's a bunch of snow on the ground and so forth, because I'm on a ridgeline. And I know that the Appalachian Trail follows that ridgeline for like hundreds of miles on that section. So if I feel like I'm going downhill, I turn the other way a little bit and keep on going and stay at the highest spot, and it was kind of fine. So eventually pick up the trail when I get back to the tree line at the far end of the ball, keep on walking. Now I can see some, mostly snow covered, but some white reassurance markers on the trees back in the forest. And that was at the edge of my skill at that time as a backpacker. The edge of my equipment. I didn't have a GPS, it was 2004. And so on and so forth. So it could have gone badly. Like I could have gotten genuinely badly lost or hurt or something like that, but I was surfing the crest of that wave at the top of my skill. Now as a result, years later, I can look back on that potentially very dangerous time, but also very satisfying time to figure out how to keep myself alive in a difficult situation. And go, man, that was kind of nuts. Well, I have a stressful week coming up, but it's not as bad as that, so all right. Maybe it's not as slow of a week as I thought it or worried that it might be. So that's a developed sense of self-efficacy from that past experience. From the flow I experienced of hiking along, being like, I'm either going to live or I'm going to die. Let's see how this goes, and let's try to stack the deck as hard as I can in my favor to not die, because hypothermia deaths are just kind of sad. You often see the person, you lose your sense of internal temperature, so people feel like they're very, very hot as their bodies start to freeze to death. So you often find hypothermia victims hundreds of yards from their tent with a string of clothes that they were stripping off because they think they're overheating, even though they're not right in the head and actually freezing to death. So I didn't want that to happen. Worked on it and transferred that skills, and that built confidence into other stuff, like being a professor, getting up in front of a class, even if I'm a strong introvert, and learning some stuff with you guys and gals. Okay? So, self-efficacy is a pretty big deal. Imagine if we had about 300 million recreation visits per year, so that's almost every man, woman, and child in the United States. About 91% of all Americans, on average, so to speak, going on recreation trips to specifically national parks, and building self-efficacy. What would our country look like if we had a whole bunch, 300 million people a year, every year, developing self-efficacy a lot on a trip like that? It'd be pretty cool. Maybe your boss wouldn't be such a jackwagon if they got to mellow out at a national park and build some like healthy senses of who they are and how to treat people, right? Maybe your professors would be way more mellow about stuff like quizzes if they went out and actually hiked in the woods instead of just doing research about them, and so on and so forth, right? So the self-efficacy thing is a pretty big deal. There are 3 dimensions of it. So we've got, this is what kind of sets up how self-efficacy goes in a particular situation. So 3 dimensions of it. We've got task magnitude. If we never have or confront any challenges, then that's a very low magnitude set of days until we pass away. But if we are taking on hard things, doing hard things for the sake of them being hard, knowing that the harder stuff is going to stretch us a little bit, grow us up a little bit, challenge us in a good way, that is a good thing. So, what's the perceived task difficulty? And we'll connect this back to being a park ranger and how we do park rangering and why here in a sec, okay? So we've got the perceived task difficulty. We've got the generality of the task as we are about to step into this new thing, this new challenge. Okay? So we've got magnitude, generality. When I had to teach myself how to design and fabricate custom electronics for my research program here at SAU. Building a bunch of sensors and stuff like that, LiDAR units, strapping them onto bikes and guns and stuff for science. That's a pretty narrow and specific set of skills. Like, I got okay at that, but I can't really transfer what I've learned in doing those things, like soldering and ordering laser heads from places like South Africa and having to translate all the manuals and stuff. It's weird. Like, that was a lot of fun. We did some crazy research a couple years ago, strapping sensors onto whatever we could just to see what we found. You know, mountain bikes, recreationists, skydivers, rock climbers, and stuff like that. Really cool stuff. But I can't use those soldering skills at a dinner party or to impress my exceedingly beautiful wife or anything like that. It's just like, yeah, I know how to solder, right? So that has low generality. Something like planning and scouting out different sites to go wood duck hunting. Okay, planning and scouting, yeah, that's pretty important, right? You can use the skills of planning pretty much everywhere. You kind of need to use the skills of planning everywhere in most all areas of your life. Otherwise, you're just sort of sloshing around without any plan and so what's the general broader applicability? Can I transfer this skill that I'm developing and really enjoying in my flow state to something else? Or in this case, do I think I will be able to transfer the skills that I develop out of this? Or is this kind of like a super interesting niche, but it's kind of a dead end? Like, what I develop here kind of stays just right here. We see specialists, experts, who are very, very good at niche things, but they're not real flexible to change job tracks, for example. So third and finally, we have our perceived strength. What is my capability to step into this potentially flow-inducing or self-efficacy building challenge? Do I have what it takes? Do I have what it takes, crucially, despite adverse developments? If everything just kind of falls into place for me, and I just kind of skate on through this challenge, this hike, this hunting trip, whatever it is, I haven't really learned anything, right? I just kind of showed up and slid on through. But if I think that I have some capability, some capacity, some sense of self-efficacy to keep on motoring forward, or to course correct if I need to kind of change my plans on the fly in the middle, like when a blizzard rolls in and you're stuck on a mountain ridge, or like when bad weather rolls in and you get a text message from a buddy who's like 30 miles down the road, or let's say 10 miles down the road, and like the storm is just not there, but it's hammering you pretty hard. Maybe you can pull up stakes, head over to his blind, and have a nice day, right? Or a nice morning hunting ducks, and so forth. So, what is your ability to persist despite adverse developments? Are you pretty overextended? Like, all right, we're gonna give this a shot, but if anything goes wrong, okay, well, we tried and we got no ability to sort of push past that. Or is this is a pretty well-known, easily in reach trip, and it kind of doesn't matter what goes wrong, we are doing this. Or something in between, okay? Ideally, it's kind of something in between. We don't want things that are fragile, that have more adverse potential than the strength that we're bringing to it. But we also don't want it to be a total cakewalk. We don't want to be cupcakes about it, right? So let's tie this back to being a park ranger. you're not able to, not interested in necessarily seeing or directly developing somebody else's sense of self-efficacy, your visitors, your clients, your users, people that are coming to your park or wildlife refuge or wilderness area, whatever it is, to enjoy their trip. Deep down inside, you know that, all right, if I can provide the opportunity, the conditions, the site, the ecosystem, the facilities that folks need to do what they are hoping to do, well then I can be an asset to them. I can uplift them into the spot of that sweet spot of I've removed for folks some of the intractable problems that they can't solve on their own as visitors to this place. So for example, for duck hunting, you need some wild open space, right? You also need some built space, like roads or at least trails for most hunters to get to those wide open spaces efficiently. So part of being a park ranger is taking a look at your road map in your park and asking, are our roads getting people where they kind of want to go? Or are we heavy on roads that are not, I mean, they're there and we're paying for the maintenance and all this stuff and dealing with accidents along them and our wildlife hit by vehicles along them, but they're not really serving our visitors. Well, you have some control over that, right? You ask your visitors, are you able to get where you want to go? Like, were you able to hunt where you were hoping to? This is a non-trivial question in some of the big sky, western plains and intermountain states, Wyoming, Colorado, stuff like that, where, you know, you need miles and miles and miles of habitat to have high-quality elk hunting. But you also need people to be able to access those compartments in any kind of an efficient way, because if you shoot just a monster bull elk and, you know, you field dress a couple of 100 pounds of meat and maybe antlers or something like that, if they gotta like drag a couple of 100 pounds of field dress meat or antlers like 40 miles on foot because there are no roads where they want to go, that's a problem, right? We're gonna have a subset of those folks, might not be everybody, but a few of those folks, their straps break on the way back and all that meat just dumps out on the ground, and now it's like, okay, I got a bunch of dirty meat. To paraphrase Dr. Evil from the 1990s Austin Powers movies, shit. Okay? So as a park ranger, you're asking yourself, what's the challenge level provided by my trails? When I have a family of 4 show up with 2 little kids, are all of my trails way too difficult and possibly even dangerous for that family? Or do I have something for them? What about the solo, college-age, hardcore hiker, backpacker, trail runner? Do I have something for her as well? Maybe, maybe not. Do I have something for somebody in a wheelchair? They have every bit as much right and desire to enjoy our beautiful natural assets in our parks. Can they do it physically, right? Do we have trails that are graded and smoothed and have safety features designed for wheelchairs so they don't go flying off the mountain edge and stuff like that? Real considerations, okay? So, you as a park ranger, you can't hand somebody that development, that skill acquisition, that experience, all wrapped up neatly with a bow. That's kind of the point, right? As an outdoor recreationist, you are going out there and sort of making the experience yourself. But what you can do as a park ranger is provide the access, the opportunity, maybe some training for folks who are just like, man, you are almost ready. Also, you should bring along a bear-proof container for your food, otherwise you're gonna get smoked, right? We can help folks with that kind of stuff, and that's a very satisfying thing to do. A lot of park rangers, as it turns out, are among the happiest employees or workers out of anybody. Like, bar almost nobody. Incidentally, the top 2 happiest professions in the United States are professors and software developers. Software developers, not necessarily everybody. That's also a very, very difficult, problematic industry. But if you're a video game player, just remember the many bots and spies that died to bring you that information. Crunch time for software developers is super unhealthy. Anyway, back to forestry. We have a lot of knobs to twist in habitat management to improve people's ability to experience the wildlife that you're managing in a way that doesn't cause the wildlife to go nuts or starve to death because of people watching them constantly or harassing them or whatever else. Okay? You can kind of set that up really pretty well. What we can't do is force folks to develop along an improved sense of self-efficacy. In the same way that we can't force our wildlife to mate and rear young successfully to improve the population, we can manipulate and improve the quality of their habitat and their environment, just like with the humans. Okay? So, let's take a couple of minutes to just kind of step back from knowledge acquisition to application here for the last 4 minutes of class. Pull out a sheet of paper. This is for you, not for me. So we're not going to turn this one in. I want you to go back in your mind for like 30 seconds to that last example of flow that you remember. And it doesn't have to be in a forest, like park environment, like forest rec kind of thing. It can just be, wherever you've experienced it, right? Just note to yourself in a phrase. You know what this memory is, but write it out in a phrase. What brought you to a flow state? For that particular memory, what were some adverse circumstances or developments or changes or events that happened while you were in that flow state? Playing the latest indie Metroidvania and you hit a really hard boss. That's an adverse development. Or hiking along a trail with a loved one, maybe your boo or bae, and they rolled their ankle. It's an adverse development. Whatever that is. Third, how did you respond? Did you throw up your hands, throw yourself to the ground, roll around like Gollum? Say, my precious is ruined, it is gone, Shire, Baggins. Or did you take a breath, square yourself to it, and figure it the heck out? Okay. Good. Fourth, after the fact, looking back now on that experience, that flow state memory, how did you change? Remember, this is for you, it's not for me. I'm not going to turn this in. You don't have to give me a Sunday school or a textbook pat answer. You can just reflect on it. I figured out how to beat that boss in the Metroidvania. Maybe not even that day, but I got back to it. These challenge responses are the entire point of the fun of games like Dark Souls, where you die over and over and over and over, and you just keep trying different stuff because it's safe for you to fail in that way. You just keep going. Okay. So fourth, how did you change? In a big way or a small way, right? It doesn't have to be like earth-shattering kind of thing. It's like, yeah, just figured out how to be the boss, you know? Felt good. Or I figured out how to help somebody with a rolled ankle out of a woodland trail over rugged terrain. And that kind of got me thinking, I really like this backcountry medicine stuff, so I ended up looking up wilderness EMT and the wilderness first responder certifications. And over winter break, I'm gonna take one of those classes over at Touch of Nature and get the certification. You get paid a ton of money as a result. All right, so it could be a big or small thing. All right, we're 10 seconds over. So pack that up, reflect on that outside of class a little bit. We'll come back next week. Thank you guys for talking about wood duck hunting with me. Metroidvanias, low, forestry, and Dark Souls. Have a good one. See you next week.